Welcome to SAM Conversation, an online program of South Asia Monitor. I'm Col Anil Bhat. Our host today is Brigadier AP Singh, an
Thank you.
alumnus of St. Columbus School, Delhi, National Defense Academy, Indian Military Academy. He was commissioned in the Corps of Engineers. And as soon as he was commissioned, he was pitched right into West Pakistan, where Indian Army had captured nearly 100 kilometers at the Chachro sector of Rajasthan. He's also an accomplished yachting sailor. He's been a national champion who's represented India in numerous competitions. He's an experienced ocean sailor and was a crew member on Trishna, which created history for being the first Indian sailboat to sail around the world in 1985-87. His other area of interest is the rich heritage of Bharat seen through its ancient architecture, monuments, and knowledge systems. His articles and papers have been published on numerous platforms. His photographs have been published as special collections. He's also the editor of a strategic affairs journal, Agni, published from New Delhi. I think there is a lot he has to tell us. Over to you, Brigadier AP.
Thank you, Anil. It's a great honor for me to be on your platform. Definitely, what I'll be speaking today should be of interest to the viewers because it's something which has the tagline below my presentation says uncovering the hidden wonders of India. Yes.
No doubt, I said, please.
Yeah. As we are aware that there are numerous incredible temples dotting not only the Indian subcontinent, but stretching across our borders, the biggest temple in the world being in Cambodia, Angkor Wat. Now, before I start on my actual presentation, I'd like to describe a few Hoysala temples first, whom I rate as standing tall in the list of the best temples anywhere in the world. Their incomparable attention to detail in their craftsmanship, nowhere else on earth one will find a better example of the proverb, God is in the details. It will be interesting to know that the Hoysalas ruled for about 300 years during the period from 1026 to 1343 CE. And their most lasting achievement, though they had many military accomplishments, but the lasting achievement has been in the field of architecture and the temples which they have left behind as their legacy. This Hoysalas came to power after defeating the Chola dynasty, which one is aware is the longest reigning dynasty in world history. The Cholas ruled continuously for over 600 years, which is quite remarkable. However, the Hoysalas defeated them and thereafter started a new era in the history of Hoysala. And this victory was commemorated by by King Vishnuvardhan by building a magnificent temple of Chandrakeshwara in Belur to commemorate the victory. This was in 1117 and thus started their journey in creating nearly 1,500 temples they built during their 300 years of rule. Unfortunately, only about 100 now remain. Rest have been destroyed. And even those 100, they are in various states of repair, disrepair. The Hoysalas themselves, as you are aware, Hindu religion is divided into Shaivism and Vaishnavism. The followers of Shiva and followers of Vishnu. The Hoysalas themselves were Shaivites, Vaishnavites. However, to maintain harmony, they generally built an equal number of Shiva temples as well as Vishnu temples. Not only that, they also constructed temples of other faiths like Jain and Buddhist, which speaks about the secular nature and their tolerance during their kingdom. It is interesting to note that Queen Shantala Devi, who was the wife of Vishnuvardhan, herself was a practicing Jain. Now, a few details about the Hoysala architecture before we go into the details of the temple itself is this is the Chandrakeshwara Temple at Belur. You can see how exquisite it is. Now, there have been a lot of study on these temples, and you can see the quote by James Ferguson in 19th century, which tells very clearly what he felt of the architecture and the sculptures which he saw, that it surpasses anything in Gothic art. Now, this is roughly the area of rule of the Hoysalas, which is just a part of history. Now, what I was saying about a few of the highlights of Hoysala temples. The prime feature of Hoysala temples is attention to minute details and skilled craftsmanship, which we'll see in this slide subsequently. Their stellate or star-shaped design of the base of the temple, with its rhythmic projections and recesses rather than a traditional rectangular layout, was another distinguishing feature. The Hoysala temple sculptures gave a great emphasis on delicacy and craftsmanship in its focus on depicting feminine beauty, grace, and physique. And lastly, the incredible detail which we'll see in these temples was achieved by the use of the material, building material they used, which was soapstone, also known as chloritic schist. Now, this stone, when it is quarried, is quite soft, but it hardens over time when exposed to the atmosphere. And this permitted the craftsmen to create very exquisite detail in their sculptures because of its softness initially. Now, you can see one of the examples of the Hoysala temples, which actually stands out in all their temples, are these polished, lathe-turned pillars which you can see. And now, this is actually phenomenal if you see physically, and even in the picture, I hope you can make out how exquisite and perfect these geometric designs they could achieve in their workmanship. And the striking feature of this is this was commonly found in all Hoysala temples, and no two pillars in any temple are alike. Every pillar is individually crafted. So another remarkable thing about Hoysala temples. Now, before we proceed further, now you can see these pillars, which I was saying, geometric designs. I mean, it is unbelievable if you see how these designs have been achieved, and the perfect geometry can be seen. And not only the design, you can even see that the tops where my pointer is, if it is visible, they have managed to even do sculpturing from inside these hollows which are there, if you can see. And not only circular shapes, they are complicated shapes. So the perfect designs actually are an outstanding feature of their temples, which these are three examples I have shown you. Another example of their geometrical expertise is these. It's not only in the design, but in the construction, how they achieve these masterpieces is actually still a mystery to us even today, because we are not aware of the technology they use to achieve such designs on such a massive scale. These are large pillars supporting the whole temple. This is the external part of the temple, and they are more than a story high. So you can imagine how they worked on these pieces to achieve such perfection. Now, these are some of the shikras, what they say, the towers which are there in the temples. And before we get further into the temple itself, I'd like to just mention a little bit about what a temple actually means. A lot of us visit temples, many of us would have visited temples, but most of us still don't know what a temple means and why it is constructed in such magnificence. There has to be a reason. It won't be just for the sake of producing a good sculpture. There has to be a deeper meaning behind. And like all Hindu objects, a temple is symbolic, symbolizing the most refined knowledge of the ancient rishis, which had been codified by them. And a temple is built and perceived in the image of Mount Meru, the sacred mountain which one would have heard of. Mount Meru represents the ultimate knowledge, and climbing it symbolizes attaining self-realization and moksha. And if you see this shikhara, this is how it looks in the shape of a mountain, slowly going up as you attain higher levels of self-realization. And a temple also is constructed as a, when you proceed from the outside of the temple to the inner side is known as the Garbhagriha. Garbhagriha is the sanctum sanctorum, which is actually the womb of the temple. And if you see, there are more carvings on the outer parts of the temple, but as you move from the outer to the inner to the sanctum sanctorium, the carvings reduce. Outside carvings are more of worldly nature. You'll see daily life scenes and animals and other things. But as you go in, the carvings keep reducing, the light keeps reducing. And finally, in the sanctum sanctorium, where there is a presiding deity, there'll be no other decoration in the sanctum sanctorium other than the presiding deity, no sculptures, no carvings, and it is absolutely dark, very dark. Maybe a lamp, oil lamp or something is glowing, which shows us that as we proceed in our journey, spiritual journey from outside to inside, it reflects that in a temple. So one should understand the basic design of why a temple is made as such, because a lot of us have questions that when you go to inside the temple to see the deity, it's absolutely dark and there's no light or ventilation and bare, and one wonders, there's such magnificence of sculptures outside, but inside it's absolutely different. But there's a reason behind it. Now, another point which a lot of us miss when we see temples is that temples are spread across the Indian subcontinent and even across Southeast Asia, including up till Japan, China. I mean, we are all aware that there are temples. There used to be temples, which some of them still exist till now. The ancient scriptures have been very specific on the iconography associated with each deity. You would have seen a deity, whether it's Shiva or Vishnu or Brahma, they'll have maybe two hands or multiple hands, and each hand is holding some object in them. And these objects are codified specially for each deity. So even if a murti is defaced, we can still identify a murti by seeing what is being held in the hands. So each have their own sort of unique items which they are holding, which are known as ayudyas. Now, this has been codified, and the point which I am bringing out is across these vast distances, across continents, the iconography of a particular deity remains the same. Everywhere a temple would have the same iconography for that particular deity, whether it's Shiva or Vishnu or Brahma or the sun god or whatever. And whether it is a temple in a remote corner of India, or it's a temple in Cambodia or Thailand or Bali, it will be the same. Now you can imagine in the ancient and medieval times when there were no written text, there was nothing available, how this could be achieved to maintain a common platform across such vast distances. So that just shows how deeply our culture and traditions were rooted amongst the followers of Sanatana Dharma. And now another point which many of us are not aware of about relating to temples is that the temples actually had a greater function than just being a spiritual center. It is, now it is quite well established that the Indian economy was the dominant economy globally for about 2/3 of known history. We are aware of that. The ancient Indian trade and commerce flourished across the globe, right from the Middle East to Europe, on the western side, and on the eastern side to Southeast Asia, Japan, China, Philippines, all these areas. This trade was actually facilitated by corporate guilds. We have heard of guilds functioning in Europe and in other places, but one hardly has heard about guilds being present in India also. And they perform the same function, something like what multinational companies perform in the present day. Now, where did the funding for all this come from? The funding actually came from the temples. So the temples also functioned as banks in the ancient times. They were the venture capitalists, what we call, for all this trade activity. This is a fact which is not known widely, even amongst us. Now, this wealth was actually then the profits which they earned, that was redistributed within the local population through economic activity which was centered around the temples. The temples were also centers of education and other social activity. Hence, we can see the importance and the multi-dimensional role which the temples performed in the ancient times. So they were not just a spiritual center, they had many other functions available. Now we'll go across to seeing a few of the specific temples. The first and the most famous Hoysala temple is the Hoysaleshwara Temple at Halibidu. It is the most exemplary architectural assemblage of the Hoysalas existing today. Most culturally and artistically sophisticated than any other, this temple is notable for its sculptures, intricate reliefs, and detailed friezes. The design is also very complex and is a masterpiece of engineering due to the presence of numerous projections. Like you can see here, it's not a flat wall or rectangular. There are a lot of projections and recesses. Actually, where you see my pointer, there's another recess going behind this curved projection. So this is how they created more surface area in which to make more sculptures and the stories which related based on the various epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. The temple at this temple has been described as an outstanding example of Indian architecture and a important milestone in the development of temple architecture. The breathtaking architectural style and grandeur of the temple adds to its mystique and classifies it as one of the most unique stone carved monuments in the world. You can see, I mean, it is actually mind-boggling when one physically visits these places. The Ishwara Temple has an incredible array of over 340 large reliefs. All these reliefs which you are seeing, they are life-size actually. And they are all based on epics which adorn the outer walls. And to give an example, there are over 240 large Ganesha statues itself in different poses in just this one temple, adorning the walls, external walls of the temple. Now, it is, and another thing which I mentioned about the details. Now, incomparable detailing is, to give an example, if you see on the left picture, there are bands which run across from the bottom to the top. Each band, like the bottommost band, is of elephants, which actually represents the strength of an elephant holding the weight of the temple above it. Now, this band covers roughly two furlongs, that is approximately 200 meters along the periphery of the temple because of the recesses and the projections. Now, no two elephants in this whole 200 meters is the same. Every elephant is a unique piece. So you can imagine the minuteness with which the planning and the sculpturing has been done. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is actually illuminating what the UNESCO website mentions about this temple. I will quote: "The sacred ensembles of the Hoysalas bear unique testimony to the extraordinary artistic achievements, architectural skills, and cultural contributions of the Hoysala period. These temples' exteriors, with attention to detail of ornamentation, clothing, dynamic movement of human and animal figures, is above and beyond any other." You can see these friezes, they are all life-size friezes, and the details are actually, one can just see and wonder how they have been achieved. And if these are various scenes from the epics, left is Ravana lifting Kailash mountain. You can just only admire and look at it. The next temple I'll just go through is the Chandrakeshwara Temple, which I mentioned earlier. Now, this temple, it took 103 years to complete. It is so complicated in its fineness and architecture. And Chandrakeshwara is Chenna is beautiful, and Keshava is another name for Krishna. So it is basically, Chandrakeshwara means that. You can see that this is above the entrance to the main doorway, this frieze, and you can see the fine work, and actually the figures which you see on top, the stone behind these have been excavated. They are all hollows below. How it was achieved, it's unimaginable how they could do such perfection. Now, this is another view of the temple from the outside. You can see the people standing, so you get an idea of the scale of this temple, and the friezes which run, the bands, the 5 bands below which run all along with the large size friezes, and the top columns pictured above. Another view of the details which you can see in the outside. As you can see, the lowest is the elephants, and going up, it goes up. So, I mean, you can just wonder at how they could achieve such complicated things. This is the main Murti of Chandrakeshwara, and this is the door, the frieze above the doorway inside the sanctum sanctorium. And you can see the fineness with which the sculptures have been executed. Now, this is a sculpture of stone. It actually looks like metal finished, polished, and the fineness with which it has been done. This is a roof panel, another amazing work of craftsmanship. You can see the fineness. To have a closer view, these are the that roof panel, a closer view of the part of the roof panel, and you can see how the meticulously minute details have been worked on. This is one of the murtis inside the Garbhagriha, again a masterpiece of sculpture. Now, this temple, Chandrakeshwara Temple, is famous for its Sabalinikas, which are dancing women, on the top of the pillars or externally all around the temple. You can see a few of them close-ups, and they are known for their fine work, which again you can see the filigree sort of work inside is all hollow actually, and in various poses, like this is a woman holding a parrot. This is playing a drum, and you can see the fineness. The fingers below the ropes are visible so clearly. This is a woman looking into a mirror. So the fineness is there. Now, we'll go to the next. We'll just go quickly to the next temple, the Lakshmi Narasimha Temple at Javgal. Another great Hoysala temple. And you can see how magnificent it is, though it is a smaller temple, but the quality of the friezes are the same. And you can see the top panel, which my pointer is showing. These are the stories from the epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana, in sequence. So actually, a temple also acted as a storyteller in the old days. There were no written books. So this is how people learned about the epics and the stories relating to epics by just visiting and going through the temple. So another function which the temple performed. These are various sculptures from this Lakshmi Narasimha temple. Again, beautiful lathe-turned pillars, the polish still persisting after all these centuries of wear and disrepair. This is the external part of the temple. You can see the panels of bands of animals and scenes from various Puranas. Now, the next temple, quickly we'll go through, is the Veer Narayan Swami temple at Belwadi. This is another very one of the bigger Hoysala temples. This is the Pujari. When we had gone, we met him. He conducted puja for us. And again, it is a temple with phenomenal sculptures covering all. There's no space left, actually, if you will watch anywhere. And now, see these pillars, the geometrical shapes, how they have been achieved. And it is not just concentric rings, but they are projections in perfect geometry. And how this is achieved, it's still a mystery to all of us. So this is what is actually the highlight of any Hoysala temple, are the pillars which they have. And as you'll see, each pillar is unique. There are no two same design. The next temple is the Amriteshwara Temple at Amritpura. This again is another phenomenal temple with one of the best carvings. You'll see these miniature shrines all along the periphery of the temple. And the panel on top where my arrow is going, the small panel, this again are stories from the epics in sequence relating various events which happened in which are there in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Now, this I have shown earlier, the polished columns in this Amriteshwara temple. These are those miniature shrines with the scenes from the epics in that panel above, and this runs all along the periphery of the temple in sequence. So you can actually follow this story of Mahabharata or Ramayana by just seeing these scenes. There are so many temples. This Chandramaleshwara Temple is one of the most complex temples. As you can see, it is on a 16-pointed star shape. This mandap outside is the sitting area, is 16-pointed star shape. It's a very one of the most complex designs of any Hoysala temple. And again, the pillars have phenomenal designs and sculptures. This is a roof panel. You can see how a roof panel, the intricacy and the details which are there in these roofs. And these panels, a temple will have a large number of these panels. They are small squares. So it's a huge, it's a magnificent place to say. Now, you can see how the engineering and the design has been done. This is all made of stone. There's nothing metal in this. And they followed a system of lock. You fit it and turn it. So they used to self-lock these parts. So you can imagine the advanced engineering knowledge which the people had even in those ancient times to create such structures which still have lasted for 1500, 2000 years. Now,
Amreshwar, I think it's a fantastic presentation you made. And I'd just like to ask you that the 7 wonders that have been instituted, it's obviously a very, very Western concept. I think if we're talking about wonders, we may be having more than 100 wonders.
I think it won't be 100. Our wonders will be in thousands, because
in thousands.
Actually, any temple you go, even the smaller, this is a very small temple, and this, by the way, is a Jain temple. It's not a Hindu temple. But the workmanship is of that quality. I mean, it's just unimaginable to see. Like this is a Jain Tirthankara's statue. It's a 18-foot high statue. But see the quality of the work. So wonders is actually unlimited. And I'm sure that there should be a review of the criteria with which wonders are classified, so that some of these monuments can be considered. Just to give another example, like other temples I've just mentioned, every one of us has been to Bombay, but I don't know how many of you have visited Elephanta Caves. Now, just to give a view, these are the caves. By the size of the people standing, you can make out the enormity of
the height of the structure.
Structure. And there are 7 such caves in Elephanta. And this one cave is 27 meters long. You imagine the scale at which the excavation, can you imagine this being excavated by hand tools, hammer and chisel? I mean, it will probably take a century.
Also, has India got the largest number of caves in the world?
Cave temples, there are large number of cave temples, and they are of all religious background. There will be Hindu religious cave, the Hindu cave. There are many Buddhist caves. There are many Jain caves. So all the religions are represented through these caves. Now, just to give an idea, these are the sculptures. It looks like you are in Egypt, but each sculpture is over 5 meters high inside those. Now, I was giving a few examples. Other than the Hoysala temple, there are also many wonders. And I'll go to a few places, the remote places which one is not very much aware of. Another place where there have been magnificent temples is Kashmir. Now, I'll just show you a slide of the famous Sun Temple at Martin, though it's been heard much. You can just have a look that it was a magnificent structure constructed in the 18th century. The present state is after the various invasions and destruction by the invaders. And it is the original temple at this place is supposed to have existed from 3007 BCE. Now you can imagine the antiquity of the place, and it is a huge complex actually. The dimensions I have just mentioned on the right. The main shrine in the center was about 40 feet high, and it was surrounded by 84 smaller shrines. The compound was 220 feet by 142 feet wide. So you can imagine the scale of this temple, which originally was built in the 8th century. Now, another sun temple, which that was also a sun temple. There are 3 sun temples we are aware of at Konarak in Kashmir and one in Gujarat, Modhera. Now, the sun temple Konarak is another magnificent structure, and it has been built on the shape of a chariot. If you look from above, it will look like a chariot, and it has 24 wheels which are decorated with symbolic designs, and there are 6 horses constructed in front, most of which are broken, but they are still there. And this was built in 13th century, and it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The highlight of this temple is reputed to be that when the original shrine was in place before its destruction, the main statue of the sun god was suspended in air, and it was held in place by powerful magnets. So that was the main thing about this temple. Now you can look, this is one of the semi-broken horses. There are 6 of them, supposed to be 6 of them, 3 on each side, pulling the sun god's chariot, because sun god normally is represented as traveling in a chariot with horses pulling it. Now, this is another phenomenal place. By the size of the figures, you can look at the scale of the temple itself here also. Now, this small diagram which you see on the right, the yellow portion is what exists now. So actually the main shrine, the Sanctum Sanctorum, was behind this, in this place, and which has totally been destroyed, which you can see on the scale here. And this was supposed to be about 229 feet high, much higher than the existing structure. So you can imagine the scale at which these temples had been built, would have been built, and how grand it would have looked. One of the tallest temples anywhere. Now, this is those 24 wheels which I was mentioning. All are exactly of same size, a diameter of 9 feet 9 inches, and each has 8 spokes. And there are figures representing various things on the wheels, as you can see. And the minute carvings which all across through the wheel, on the wheel, it's really mind-boggling. Now, another temple complex from Kashmir, which hardly anyone of us has heard of. This is the Naranak temple complex in Vangat Valley. It's in a remote place up in the mountains. Now, this temple cluster is spread over 200 meters at an altitude of 2,128 meters. So you can imagine it's a high altitude, it's halfway up the mountain, and built in the 8th century by the great Emperor Lalitaditya Muktapida. Now, you can imagine in those days carrying all the building material, the labor, the staff, and this is a heavy snowfall area actually. So, I mean, it is unimaginable how they could construct at such a remote, high altitude place in those times. This is off the Srinagar Leh highway, actually, ahead of Sonamarg. You can see it consisted of 17 temple structures, and there were two groups of temples. One group you can see here in the far distance. One group is where I am, from where this photo has been taken, and there was a central pavilion. And it had huge temples of 25 feet square externally, and a big pavilion in the middle, which is now totally in ruins. So you can just see the scale of this magnificent complex, which would have been there when it was constructed. So another magnificent temple I recently visited. This is in Bhubaneshwar. You just see the fineness of the carvings of the spire, and it's actually amazing how it has been achieved. Another 10th century temple. So there are actually innumerable temples you can think of. This temple has 12 pillars representing the 12 zodiac signs, what are called as Rashi's thumb. And the sunlight falls in the early morning upon the appropriate Rashi pillar during each of the 12 months of the solar year. And I mean, you can imagine firstly, the knowledge of astronomy, the knowledge of engineering, and everything, how they could have designed this. And these 12 pillars, the sunlight which falls on it, there are actually three openings. One is in the front here, and one is on the right side, one is on the left. So from these three openings during the various months, the sunlight comes and falls on that particular zodiac pillar. So, I mean, another mind-boggling temple and its design and construction. And lastly, just to give another example of the engineering expertise, this is the deepest stepwell in India. We have all heard of stepwells. Rajasthan is famous. This is the deepest. 30 meters it goes below, 100 feet. And it has about 3,500 steps in 13 stories. And the temperature at the bottom is 5 to 6 degrees cooler than what it is in the top. And you can see the engineering precision, not only in the design, but in the construction and execution. So it's another phenomenal piece of a monument of from the past. And all these figure nowhere in the world's, various lists.
Yet another of thousands of wonders.
Thousands of wonders, yes. So there are actually so many places to see. And just to give a quote from a very famous art historian, you can just read this, that I mean, what he has written is something he's trying to convey with what cannot be conveyed actually.
No facets of the Indian temple are the same. Every evolution of every scroll is different. No two canopies in the whole building are alike, and every part exhibits a joyous exuberance of fancy scorning every mechanical restraint. All that is wild in human faith or warm in human feeling is found portrayed in these walls. Fantastic.
So this is
it's great that a Westerner is saying this.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and that too quite some time back, 1876.
Anyway, Brigadier Vaishnav AP Singh, it's a pleasure. It's such an education for us to have seen your presentation. Marvelously done, and more power to you. And thank you very much. May you carry on revealing more such wonders. All the best to you.
Thank you. And just to mention, all the photographs which I've shown are taken by me. So that is part of my visits to these places.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.